All right, so this guy named FatMan on Twitter, that's literally his name, is FatMan Terra, on Twitter, recently kind of emerged this month. His account was created May of 2022, and he's sort of dedicated this account to trying to dig and uncover a lot of what was going on behind the scenes with Do Kwon, with Terra, Luna, and that whole ecosystem. And a lot of what he's been putting out has been really kind of speculative, but also has a lot of teeth to it. And if it's true, would be a big issue for the project and just its holders in general. It sounds like there was maybe more going on. There's always more going on behind the scenes, but it sounds like maybe there was some malicious acting going on behind the scenes with the Terra Foundation. There's also been just numerous accusations outside of what is on FatMan's Twitter page, that people have been throwing around. How much of it is true, not sure. But this guy in particular has been posting a lot of his research and sources along with his claims, which have, from what I've seen, have all been very grounded. They've all been really solid sources. It appears that a lot of what he's saying is true. So anyways, I just wanted to break down what he was saying with you guys and kind of follow this story along, because events like what happened with Terra Luna are terrible. A lot of people lost a lot of money, but there's a lot of lessons and key takeaways that we can get from this whole thing that maybe will help you identify something similar in the future, because there will be bad actors in the future. There will be projects that go under. So, maybe this will help you do better due diligence in the future. If you were involved in it, again, I'm terribly sorry. If you weren't, this is still very useful just so that you can take these lessons and apply them again to your future research. So, he put out this tweet, which I'll put up on the screen here, and it says, "In the past 48 hours, I've been contacted by several whistleblowers. These people would like to and will stay anonymous. I have learned some deeply troubling things, and there's a lot more to come. This is just the very beginning. Here is some of what I can tell you." So he names a couple things in here, so I'm going to read through what he lists out. First one, stablecoin. This is Do Kwon, obviously. "I know about the bailout from Jump in May 2021. I know exactly how much you owe them every month in Luna. Hint, how many zeros in a million? Jump, I know exactly what you did to manipulate retail into losing billions on UST, but especially Luna. Kanav, Korea, I'm not sure who that is. I know who controls you behind the scenes. I know about your Slack group only having a 14-day retention window. Sam Bankman-Fried, I know about the 30% serum handshake deal with Jump and what you did to retail investors after. There's far more that I cannot say, but know that I know, and that the justice is coming, because this time I think you went too far. This time you killed people. Someone has to fight for them. If I go, I'll take my place. This is nothing. Just the start. Go time." All right, so there's a lot to unpack from this string of tweets, but there's a connection that I drew in the beginning of all of this and this FatMan account. I was listening to Unchained, which, for those of you who are in the podcast space, I'm sure you're familiar. It's a podcast done by Laura Shin on crypto. She does a really good job. She's got some really good interviewers that showed up on there. But one of her guests brought up the fact that through this whole Luna Terra crash, UST crash, that there was a lot of whales involved. Obviously, I think it was $30 billion of value locked in this whole ecosystem. And so with that, you need exit liquidity to get out of a position. Okay, so big whales, when you are invested heavily, millions of dollars into a project, you can't just market sell your position, because the price will crash and there's just not enough people buying to offset that selling. So a lot of times what you have to do is trickle out of your position. Now, a lot of times, in situations like this, they're trickling out more aggressively. But what you can do is you can time it for when there might be a large set of buyers. That's the ideal way to get out of a large position, right? Is you want to find a buyer that's big enough to offset your selling. And one of the guests on Laura Shin's podcast brought up the fact that there was a gap in time where Do Kwon was buying this, the Bitcoin to protect the peg. Now, when he is protecting the peg, what he is doing is buying UST. And so what the speculation was, and there's not a lot of ground on this, at least yet. I've been trying to dig and find some research on this. I'm sure time will tell. But what people are speculating is that he timed these purchases and let people, like the big investors, know when these purchases were going to happen, so that way they could sell into that buying pressure and get out of their big positions. Now this crushes retail because, yes, retail has the same opportunity to sell into this, but retail doesn't affect the market as much. And so when these big players are selling like this, it basically offsets the money being used to protect the peg. So that's really what it was, is he was crashing, because remember, he was cashing out lots of Luna in order to buy the Bitcoin to protect UST. And so basically he was robbing the Luna holders to get whales out of their UST positions, right? He basically took that money and transferred it to UST so that these whales had liquidity to sell into. Again, this is speculation, but it seems highly probable, and it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of big sales that were going on at this time. So whether Do Kwon actually reached out to them and let them know or not, someone definitely knew, because there was a lot of selling during this time. So that is one piece that I wanted to throw out there, because that's a big deal. So anyways, getting back to FatMan, there's some parallels. I kind of wonder if it's not the same guy. I'm speculating here. I'm not going to name any names because I'm not sure if it is him or not, but it seems like, some things line up with what that guest was saying on Laura Shin's podcast. But another thing is the Project Jump. So there was a huge ecosystem around Luna. A lot of you guys know that. Terra Luna had a huge ecosystem between UST, the Luna token, Jump. And what Jump was, I tried to do a lot of research on Jump. I believe it's a launch pad, which just basically kickstarts new projects and gives funding for new projects. I believe that's what it was. I went to the website. It's very vague. It doesn't go into any details on what Jump actually is. It just says that they're gathering the best minds, which whatever that means. So there's no clear definition of what Jump is, at least that I could find. If you guys know what Jump is, definitely throw it down in the comments section. I'd like to know if I'm right or wrong on this. But it appears to be a launch pad. They definitely have done some crowdfunding type deals on Jump, and it turns out, it seems like Jump was really just a way to take advantage of retail investors. And a lot of time, you get a lot of that with seed investing and things like that, where, some early group gets majority share of the tokens, and then as soon as the project goes, I guess, public, or as soon as retail can trade it, they dump that whole share because it was practically free for them. They're already 10x or whatever their initial investment. They dump that all over retail, and it sounds like that's what this whole Jump thing was meant to do, was to somehow dump that on the Luna holders or on the retail investors looking to participate in the Jump platform. So it sounds like this whole thing was a squeeze on retail, and that is super detrimental, and it's not sustained because eventually retail runs out of money, right? They're not as big or as smart as a lot of the whales. This is no offense. I'm a retail trader, and I can tell you right now, I don't get a lot of the insider knowledge that, these big whales, these big investment firms get. And so when we participate in things like, these Jump projects, and we try to seed invest, basically it's not really seed investing, it's investing right after the seed investors. That's super risky, and usually we're only getting half the story, and we're usually at a disadvantage. And it sounds like this whole Jump deal was meant to take advantage of retail investors. Now, I want to put all this out there because these are a lot of red flags that maybe don't necessarily tie directly to the Luna Terra crash, but are sort of an idea of what these people really were, the team behind the scenes, what they were really, what kind of actors they really were. Because if you would have caught a lot of this stuff maybe going on with Jump, maybe it would have left a sour taste in your mouth, and you're like, you know what, I don't want to be a part of Luna or UST based on, what I know about the team. And that would have kind of pulled you away. So these are red flags that, again, don't necessarily tie directly to Luna, but are very important to notice, because after the fact, a lot is coming out, and the authorities in South Korea are investigating Do Kwon. So he's got charges against him, so I'm sure a lot of this is going to come to light. Another thing that kind of came up that was big was that he might not have sold all the Bitcoin to protect the UST peg. He claims he did, but a lot of people are saying that he just shuffled wallets. That if you go to the Explorers, you can see how it really is just a circle of wallets that he sent it around to make it look like he sold his Bitcoin, but that really it's stashed somewhere, or some of it trickled off into side accounts to basically give them reserves for themselves personally. I don't know on that front either, but these are all sort of points that have been thrown out in the last few days that have been big stories, really. And if it's true, is just a sign of, and I hate to say this, I know you guys are going to tear me apart, but I do think that we need some regulation, okay? Over-regulation and unsmart regulation are not good, right? We don't want politicians coming in here and making regulations about things they don't know about, but if we can get some experts in the field to give us some regulations so that there's this transparency and a process that has to be gone through in situations like this, I think that's really important. And I think that that's actually needed. A lot of you guys, I'm sure, don't, every man for themselves, and that you should learn these things. But ultimately, getting into the space and trying to learn what's going on in crypto is a whole big bite to take. And a lot of people lose a lot of money in their first few years of trading crypto, and that it goes for trading anything, stocks or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that in the crypto world, it's almost, even if you know what you're doing, it's hard to get to the bottom of things sometimes. It's hard to find out what the real information is, and what's going on with projects. It just really is. You kind of have to look and see what you're finding on Twitter, which Twitter is just a whole mess of information. Some of it true, some of it not. So deciphering that is hard to do. And so I think there should be a formal way for teams to transparently come out with news on what they're doing and a process for if a project enters a death spiral, or if they have to liquidate funds or whatever it is, that they disclose exactly how they are doing that, and that there's a process to do that. So I think ultimately this would protect retail. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think. I'm going to continue to follow along the story. Again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here. I just want to pull the lessons that we can out of this, because crashes like this are terrible, but they only come around once in a while on this grand of scale. And so there's a lot of takeaways that we can take from this. And it's really getting pretty crazy on the Do Kwon side and the whole LFG situation. So I want to follow along with that with you. So if you got more that you guys want to add, definitely drop it down in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.